Hello and welcome. I'm Hullhound, and in this video we'll be continuing to develop our Frogger clone. If you haven't already, I recommend starting from part 1. In the last video we implemented player death and particle effects. In this video we'll be adding drowning and moving platforms. Let's start by moving the respawn point in the player to be on this middle safe zone. So to do that we will minus from Y position 16 times 6. And we'll also do that for the player. We're going to add drowning as a mechanic. So the first thing that we need to do is implement the idea of water. So we go to our project settings, and scroll down to our 2D physics. We can add water as one of our physics layers. And close that. And then in the tile map, we can go to tile set, which is available here at the bottom once you're selected on the tile map node. Go to select our water tile. On the right, we can add a physics layer, and we can then assign that to be a water tile. If we scroll down, we can set what the collision shape is. In this case, I'm just going to select the 3 dots and then reset the default, which sets it as a square. Now that we have water, it's time to detect that water. We can use the same approach that we used for the vehicle damage sources earlier. So to begin with, let's create a player node and create a node 2D. In this case, I'm going to call this drowning detector. And then I'm going to add a area 2D, which I'm going to call water detector. For purposes, I'm going to copy the collision shape by using Ctrl D and then moving it underneath the water detector. For completeness, I'm actually going to mark this as make unique. This means that if I change this shape, it won't impact the same one for the damage source. I don't need to do this as they do overlap, but it's a decent practice. Let's convert the node into its own scene so that we can manipulate it in a slightly easier way. So we can do that by right-clicking and then save branch as scene. Drowning detector is fine. By going into the scene, we see just the shape. Let's add a script to the drowning detector so that we can customize its behavior. As we're trying to create an event where the drowning detector says you're now drowning, and we want the player to react to that, we need a signal. These signals are similar to the on area exited events that we've used previously. And you can create them yourself by using signal and then the name of the event, in this case, drowned. We could make it so that when the water detector immediately detects water, we call the drowned event. However, we're going to do things slightly differently in this case, and it'll become clear why when we move on to moving platforms next. So for the purposes of this, what I want to do is create a variable, which is water collisions. That will be an integer, and it will start off at 0. Next, let's adjust the water detector so that it can actually detect water. To begin with, we'll go to the water detector area 2D node, we'll change the layer to nothing, and we'll set the mask to be water, which is number 4. We'll then go to the node tab, and we're interested in hooking into the body entered and body exited signals. This is what's used when tile map have physical properties. So we'll press connect, and we'll just go with the default names. For both of these, what I want is a count of the current collisions. So what I will do is I'll do water collision, and then I'll use plus equals to say this value plus 1. And then when we're exiting, it's this value minus 1. And then for completeness, I will set a condition that happens every frame. so that if we're colliding with water, but we're not colliding with less than one of them, then we'll do nothing. But if we're colliding with more than one of them, we'll call the drowned event. So if water collision is greater than 0, colon, note the indented tab for it being a branch of that code, drowned.emit, which means we emit that signal. In the player node, we can connect the drowning detector so that the player knows when the player is drowning. To do that, we press the drowning detector, go to node, right click on drowned and connect. I'll just go with the default name again. As a test, I'll just do print and then test. And if I play the game, press F6. If I play the game with F5, then when I enter the water, it should say that I'm drowning, which is perfect. The obvious issue with this is that we're getting the drowning event every frame. Ideally, we want to only get the drowning event the first time we enter the water. So let's adjust our script to reflect that. In the drowning detector script, let's create a variable called isDrowning. We'll set that to this condition here. And then, for when we drown, we want to say, if we're drowning now, but we're not, so that's exclamation mark for not, and double ampersand for and, was drowning last frame, which we'll need to create up here as a new class level variable. So var was drowning last frame equals false. And then what we can just do is, after we run our logic, at the end of the frame, we can say, was I drowning last frame is the value of whatever we're currently drowning now. If we press F5 to run the game and move into the water, we can see that we only get the drowning event the first time we start drowning. Now that we know when a player is drowning, let's use that to kill the player and make them respawn. So we already have very similar code to this here in our on-damage source detector event when we're hitting vehicles. So let's use this opportunity to refactor this into a died function, which is a type void, as we're not expecting to return anything. And then all we'll do is we'll copy this into this new function, and we can call died in the on-damage detector function. Similarly, now that we've factored that out, we can do exactly the same thing in our on-drowning detector. If we run this, we should now see that we respawn whenever we enter the water, and similarly when we hit vehicles. Now that the player can drown, it's time to make them not drown. So we need to add some safe platforms that allow the player to traverse from where they currently are to the end of the map. So let's make those. Let's start by adding a new lane. So add child node, node 2D, and we'll call this lane 6. Within that, we'll add a new child node, again also a node 2D, which we'll call platform. I'll just call it safe platform. And I'm going to convert that into a new branch, safe platform, and save. Going into here, we need to do very similar to what we did for vehicles. So let's start by adding a sprite 2D, which we can set to have a texture. So load, assets, Kenny, tiles, and I'm just going to look for this icon. We also need to set the offset to not be centered. Additionally, what we can do is copy over our AutoMover 2D node, so AutoMover 2D, and place that there, and assign it to our platform. For right now, I'm just going to set the speed to 20, and set lane 6 to have its Y position here. So Y is 16 times 5. Now that we have a platform that exists in the world, we need to make it act like a platform. So for this, we want to add a new physics collisions layer. We can do project, project settings, and here we can add in platform and close. If we go to our vehicle, we can copy our visibility offset 2D and our area 2D and just paste them into here. Again, I like to make the shape unique. I'll adjust the area 2D so that it counts as a platform. So change it from 3 to 5. So currently the platforms don't work, and attempting to stand on them will still make the player treated as drowned. So what we need to do is, in our drowning detector, we need to duplicate our water detector. That's Control D, and then rename it to platform detector. Can't spell. And then to do that, we also need to change its collision so that it's looking for a platform. In terms of its events, we need to disconnect the events that are already there and then add new ones. However, in this case, a vehicle is using a platform is using an area 2D. So we need to be using the on area entered and area exited. So on platform detector and area exited. In this case, we can add a new variable, which is platform collisions. Int, which starts at 0. And in much the same way, we can increase this. Platform collisions plus equals 1, and platform collisions minus equal 1. That gives us a count of all of the platforms we're colliding with and the water tile that we're colliding with. To make this work, we need to update our isDrowning code so that we're colliding with the water and we're not colliding with any platform. So our platform collision count is smaller than or equal to 0. All going to plan, we should now be able to stand on the platform and not die. And that lasts until we're no longer there. Before we forget, let's set the visibility offset 2D target so that the safe platform will also correctly loop around the sides of the map. Let's set up our safe platform so that it has customizable options in the same way that our vehicle did. So let's take our speed and rotation offset, copy them into our drowning detector. And then we'll also copy the relevant elements from here, so speed and offset amount. By copying that in, we'll now be able to modify those traits from within the inspector. Just a really quick correction. I've noticed that I accidentally added in the safe platform code into the drowning detector. So let's create a new script called safe platform, and we can copy over the speed, rotation, offset, and the ready function into our safe platform code. And that should fix the build issue. In order to move the player automatically when the platform moves, we need to know when the player is on the platform and by how much the platform is moved. So let's make some changes to our AutoMover2D script to signal when a movement has happened and by how much. So let's start by adding a signal and then moved. But in this case, we want to provide a parameter, which is the moved amount. So vector 2, and the name of that is movement amount. So different to the signals that we've been using earlier is that we can now pass in the amount that it is moved. So in this case, I'll change my process by creating a variable called moved amount, setting it to the value that we would otherwise be moving the platform by, and then moving it by that. I can then, each time we move, call the signal passing in the moved amount. This means that our functionality remains the same, but we've gained the ability to hook in and detect how much movement has happened. Now let's make a player mover script to move the player when it's been detected. So let's do that by creating a new Node2D node, Node2D, player mover. And we'll create this as a branch as well. So it's called player mover 2D. So save branch as seen, save. Inside this, we'll add a player detector node. So that's an area 2D that we'll use as our base, and we'll name it player detector. And of course, we need ourselves a new collision shape as well. With our trusted rectangle, setting the size to 14 and 14. And it's offset to 8 and 8. Just checking on 2D that it looks right, which it does. Now that we have the player detector set up, we need to make sure that it's looking for the right collision layers. So collision, don't care about what this is, but we care that it is looking for a player. Nice and straightforward. Let's add a script onto the player mover 2D. And very similar to what we did for the drowning detector, let's create a variable to store our player in this case. Var player, which takes a node 2D, and we're going to start it off with a null value, which means empty. When a player, so in this case what we'll do in a moment is we'll set our player to be an area. So we're interested in the area entered and exited. So when we enter, we'll set player to be area. And when we exit, we'll set player to be null. So this works because we know there's only one player. Now that we know when a player is on the platform, we need to move the player when appropriate. So let's create a new function called move player, which takes a movement amount, which is a vector 2. In this case, we're only interested in moving the player when we have a player. So if player is not equal to null, then player.position is itself plus the movement amount. Nice and straightforward. What we can do now, if we go back to the safe platform, is we can skip a middleman effectively by saying AutoMover2D, when we've moved, connect and call on the player mover 2D script the move player. By pushing pick, you'll often be able to pull out the ones that have the right signature when you've got additional parameters. And that means that the safe platform node doesn't interact with this interaction. It's done purely using signals from the various nodes. So let's set our platform to have appropriate settings. So in this case, I'll give it a speed of 20 in the x direction, and let's steal our rotation offset from a vehicle. So if we now press F5 to run the game, we'll see that this moves. In order to have the platform detect the player, we need to set the player to interact with the physics system. So we need to change our node 2D to an area 2D. To do that, we can right click on the player, select change type, and then change it to an area 2D. That then changes, and it now requires a collision shape. So for convenience, we can duplicate this one, add it as a child of player, and make it unique. And save. In order to get the platform to actually move the player, we need to mark the player as a player, set the collision layer to 2, which is our player, remove the mask, and there's also some little cleanup we need to do. The damage source detector was also marked as a player. Let's uncheck that, and if we then run the game, we should see that we correctly move along with the platform. However, we are behind the platform, which isn't ideal. So let's fix that by going to our level scene, taking our player and moving it beneath the lanes. This is because of the way the Z-index works on 2D. If we do that, we're now on top of the platform. That's it for this video. Remember to subscribe to be notified when part 5 comes out.